Okay, welcome back to episode 6 of the Mueller Report audiobook. We're moving through volume 1. We're up to page 95. We're talking about members of the 2016 Trump campaign and some of their connections to Russia. Up to page 95. Number 3, Carter Page. Carter Page worked for the Trump campaign from 2016 to September 16. He was formally and publicly announced as a foreign policy advisor by the candidate in March 2016. Page had lived and worked in Russia, and he had been approached by Russian intelligence officers several years before he volunteered for the Trump campaign. During his time with the campaign, Page advocated pro-Russia foreign policy positions and travelled to Moscow in his personal capacity. Russian intelligence officials had formed relationships with Page in 2008 and 2013, and Russian officials may have focused on Page in 2016 because of his affiliation with the campaign. However, the investigation did not establish that Page coordinated with the Russian government in its efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Before he began working for the campaign in January 2016, Page had substantial prior experience studying Russian policy issues and living and working in Moscow. From 2004 to 2007, Page was the deputy branch manager of Merrill Lynch's Moscow office. There he worked on transactions involving the Russian energy company Gazprom and came to know Gazprom's deputy chief financial officer, Sergei Yatsenko. In 2008, Page founded Global Energy Capital LLC GEC, an investment management and advisory firm focused on the energy sector in emerging markets. Some redaction there. The company otherwise had no sources of income, and Page was forced to draw down his life savings to support himself and pursue his business venture. Page asked Yatsenko to work with him at GEC as a senior advisor on a contingency basis. Some further redactions there. In 2008, Page met Alexander Bulatov, a Russian government official who worked at the Russian consulate in New York. Page later learned that Bulatov was a Russian intelligence officer. Some more redaction. In 2013, Viktor Podobny, another Russian intelligence officer, worked covertly in the United States under diplomatic cover, formed a relationship with Page. Podobny met Page at an energy symposium in New York City, began exchanging emails with him. Podobny and Page also met in person on multiple occasions, during which Page offered his outlook on the future of the energy industry and provided documents to Podobny about the energy business. In a recorded conversation on April 8, 2013, Podobny told another intelligence officer that Page was interested in business opportunities in Russia. In Podobny's words, Page got hooked on Gazprom, thinking that if they have a project he could rise up, maybe he can. It's obvious he wants to earn lots of money. Podobny said he had led Page on by feeding him empty promises, and Podobny would use his Russian business connections to help Page. Podobny told the other intelligence officer that his method of recruiting foreign sources was to promise them favours and then discard them once he obtained relevant information from them. In 2015, Podobny and 2 other Russian intelligence officers were charged with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent in a foreign government. The criminal complaint detailed Podobny's interactions and conversations about Page, who was identified only as Male 1. Based on the criminal complaint's description of the interactions, Page was aware that he was the individual described as Male 1. Page later spoke with a Russian government official at the United Nations General Assembly and identified himself so that the official would understand he was Male 1 from the Podobny complaint. Page told the official that he didn't do anything. Redaction. In interviews with the FBI before the office's opening, Page acknowledged that he understood that the individuals he had associated with were members of the Russian intelligence services, but he stated that he had only provided immaterial, non-public information to them, and he did not view his relationship as a back-channel. Page told investigating agents that the more immaterial, non-public information I give them, the better for this country. Origins and early campaign work. January 2016, Page began volunteering on an informal, unpaid basis for the Trump campaign. after Ed Cox, a state Republican Party official, introduced Page to Trump campaign officials. Pardon me. Page told the office that his goal in working on the campaign was to help candidate Trump improve relations with Russia. To that end, Page emailed campaign officials offering his thoughts on US-Russia relations, prepared talking points and briefing memos on Russia, and proposed that candidate Trump meet President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. In communications with campaign officials, Page repeatedly touted his high-level contacts in Russia and his ability to forge connections between candidate Trump and senior Russian government officials. For example, on January 30, 2016, Page sent an email to senior campaign officials stating that he had spent the last week in Europe and had been in discussions with some individuals with close ties to the Kremlin, who recognised that Trump could have a game-changing effect on bringing the end of the new Cold War. The email stated that through his discussions with these high-level contacts, Page believed that a direct meeting in Moscow between Mr. Trump and Putin could be arranged. Page closed the email by criticising US sanctions on Russia. A sentence or two under redaction. On March 21, 2016, candidate Trump formally and publicly identified Page as a member of his foreign policy team to advise on Russia and the energy sector. Over the next several months, Page continued providing policy-related work product to campaign officials. For example, on April 2016, Page provided feedback on an outline for a foreign policy speech that the candidate gave at the Mayflower Hotel. See Volume 1, Section 4. On May 2016, Page prepared an outline of an energy policy speech for the campaign and then travelled to Bismarck, North Dakota, to watch the candidate deliver the speech. Chief Policy Advisor Sam Clovis expressed appreciation for Page's work and praised his work to other campaign officials. Carter Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. Page's affiliation with the Trump campaign took on a higher profile and drew the attention of Russian officials after the candidate named him as a foreign policy advisor. As a result, in late April 2016, Page was invited to give a speech at the July 2016 commencement ceremony at the new economics school, NES, in Moscow. The NES commencement ceremony generally featured high-profile speakers. For example, President Barack Obama delivered a commencement address at the school in 2009. NES officials told the office that the interest in inviting Page to speak at NES was based entirely on his status as a Trump campaign advisor who served as the candidate's Russia expert. Andrei Krikovich, an associate of Page's and assistant professor at the Higher School of Economics in Russia, recommended that NES rector Shlomo Weber invite Page to give the commencement address based on his connection to the Trump campaign. Denis Klimentov, an employee of NES, said that when Russians learned of Page's involvement in the Trump campaign in March 2016, the excitement was palpable. Weber recalled that in summer 2016 there was substantial interest in the Trump campaign in Moscow, and he felt that bringing a member of the campaign to the school would be beneficial. Page was eager to accept the invitation and speak at NES, and he sought approval from Trump campaign officials to make the trip to Russia. On May 16, 2016, while the request was still under consideration, Page emailed Clovis, J.D. Gordon and Walid Fares and suggested that candidate Trump take his place speaking at the commencement ceremony in Moscow. On June 19, 2016, Page followed up again a request approval to speak at the NES event and to reiterate that NES would love to have Mr. Trump speak at this annual celebration in Page's place. Campaign manager Corey Lewandowski responded the same day saying, "If you want to do this, it would be outside of your role with DJT for President campaign. I'm certain Mr. Trump will not be able to attend." In early July 2016, Page travelled to Russia for the NES events. On July 5, 2016, Denis Klimentov, copying his brother Dmitry Klimentov, emailed Maria Zakharova, a director at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Information and Press Department, about Page's visit and his connection to the Trump campaign. Denis Klimentov said in the email that he wanted to draw the Russian government's attention to Page's visit in Moscow. His message to Zakharova continued, Page is Trump's advisor on foreign policy. He is a known businessman. He used to work in Russia. If you have any questions, I will be happy to help contact him. Dmitry Klimentov then contacted Russian Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov about Page's visit to see if Peskov wanted to introduce Page to any Russian government officials. The following day, Peskov responded to what appears to have been the name Denis Klimentov-Zakharova email thread. Peskov wrote, "I've read about Page. Specialists say that he is far from being the main one, so I better not initiate a meeting in the Kremlin." On July 7, 2016, Page delivered the first of his 2 speeches in Moscow at NES. In the speech, Page criticised the US government's foreign policy towards Russia, stating that Washington and other Western capitals have impeded potential progress through their often hypocritical focus on ideas such as democratisation, inequality, corruption and regime change. On July 8, 2016, Page delivered a speech during the NES commencement. After Page delivered his commencement address, Russian Deputy Prime Minister and NES board member Arkady Dvorkovich spoke at the ceremony and stated that the sanctions the United States had imposed on Russia had hurt the NES. Page and Dvorkovich shook hands at the commencement ceremony, and Weber recalled Dvorkovich made statements to Page about working together in the future. And a sentence there is redacted, as it's subject to grand jury. Page said that during his time in Moscow, he met with friends and associates he knew from when he lived in Russia, including Andrei Baranov, a former Gazprom employee who had become the head of investor relations at Rosneft, a Russian energy company. A sip of tea. Page stated that he and Baranov talked about immaterial non-public information. Page believed he and Baranov discussed Rosneft President Igor Sechin, and he thought Baranov might have mentioned the possibility of a sale of a stake in Rosneft in passing. Page recalled mentioning his involvement in the Trump campaign with Baranov, although he did not remember details of the conversation. Page also met with individuals from Tatneft, a Russian energy company, to discuss possible business deals, including having Page work as a consultant. On July 8, 2016, while he was in Moscow, Page emailed several campaign officials and stated he would send a readout soon regarding some incredible insights and outreach I've received from a few Russian legislators and senior members of the presidential administration here. On July 9, 2016, Page emailed Clovis, writing in pertinent part, Russian Deputy Prime Minister and NES board member Arkady Dvorkovich also spoke before the event. In a private conversation, Dvorkovich expressed strong support for Mr. Trump and a desire to work together toward devising better solutions in response to the vast range of current international problems. Based on feedback from a diverse array of other sources close to the presidential administration, it was readily apparent that this sentiment is widely held at all levels of government. Despite these representations to the campaign, we've got a paragraph of redaction here, subject to grand jury. The office was unable to obtain additional evidence or testimony about who Page may have met or communicated with in Moscow. Thus, Page's activities in Russia, as described in his emails with the campaign, were not fully explained. Still on Carter Page, later campaign work and removal from the campaign. In July 2016, after returning from Russia, Page travelled to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. While there, Page met Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak. That interaction is described in Volume 1, Section 4. Page later emailed campaign officials with feedback he said he received from ambassadors he had met at the convention, and he wrote that Ambassador Kislyak was very worried about candidate Clinton's world views. Some more redaction there. Following the convention, Page's trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russia foreign policy drew the media's attention and began to generate substantial press coverage. The campaign responded by distancing itself from Page, describing him as an informal foreign policy advisor who did not speak for Mr. Trump or the campaign. On September 23, 2016, Yahoo News reported that US intelligence officials were investigating whether Page had opened private communications with senior Russian officials to discuss US sanctions policy under a possible Trump administration. Campaign spokesman told Yahoo News that Page had no role in the campaign and that the campaign was not aware of any of his activities past or present. On September 24, 2016, Page was formally removed from the campaign. Although Page had been removed from the campaign after the election, he sought a position in the Trump administration. On November 14, 2016, he submitted an application to the transition team that inflated his credentials and experiences, stating that in his capacity as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, he had met with top world leaders and effectively responded to diplomatic outreach efforts from senior government officials in Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. Page received no response from the transition team. When Page took a personal trip to Moscow in December 2016, he met again with at least one Russian government official. That interaction and a discussion of the December trip are set forth in Volume 1, Section 4. Dimitri Simes and the Centre for the National Interest. Members of the Trump campaign interacted on several occasions with the Centre for National Interest, or CNI, principally through its President and Chief Executive Officer, Dimitri Simes. CNI is a think tank with expertise in and connections to the Russian government. Simes was born in the former Soviet Union, immigrated to the United States in the 1970s. In April 2016, candidate Trump delivered his first speech on foreign policy and national security at an event hosted by the National Interest, a publication affiliated with CNI. Then Senator Jeff Sessions and Russian Ambassador Kislyak both attended the event, and as a result it gained some attention in relation to Sessions' confirmation hearings to become Attorney General. Sessions had various other contacts with CNI during the campaign period on foreign policy matters, including Russia. Jared Kushner also interacted with Simes about Russian issues during the campaign. The investigation did not identify evidence that the campaign passed or received any messages to or from the Russian government through CNI or Simes. A. CNI and Dimitri Simes connect with the Trump campaign. CNI is a Washington-based non-profit organisation that grew out of a centre founded by former President Richard Nixon. CNI describes itself as a voice for strategic realism in US foreign policy and publishes a bi-monthly foreign policy magazine, The National Interest. CNI is overseen by a board of directors and an advisory council that is largely honorary and whose members at the relevant time included Sessions, who served as an advisor to candidate Trump on national security and foreign policy issues. Dimitri Simes, as president and CEO of CNI and the publisher and CEO of the National Interest. Simes was born in the former Soviet Union, immigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and joined CNI's predecessor after working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Simes personally has many contacts with current and former Russian government officials, as does CNI collectively. As CNI stated when seeking a grant from the Carnegie Corporation in 2015, CNI has unparalleled access to Russian officials and politicians among Washington think tanks, in part because CNI has arranged for US delegations to visit Russia and for Russian delegations to visit the United States as part of a so-called Track 2 diplomatic effort. On March 14, 2016, CNI board member Richard Plepler organised a luncheon for CNI and its honorary chairman Henry Kissinger at the Time Warner Building in New York. The idea behind the event was to generate interest in CNI's work and recruit new board members for CNI. Along with Simes, attendees at the event included Jared Kushner, son-in-law of candidate Trump. Kushner told the office that the event came at a time when the Trump campaign was having trouble securing support from experienced foreign policy professionals, that as a result, he decided to seek Simes' assistance during the March 14 event. Simes and Kushner spoke again on March 24, 2016 telephone call, 3 days after Trump had publicly named the team of foreign policy advisors that had been put together on short notice. On March 31, 2016, Simes and Kushner had an in-person one-on-one meeting in Kushner's New York office. During that meeting, Simes told Kushner that the best way to handle foreign policy issues for the Trump campaign would be to organise an advisory group of experts to meet with candidate Trump and develop a foreign policy approach that was consistent with Trump's voice. Simes believed that Kushner was receptive to that suggestion. Simes also had contact with other individuals associated with the Trump campaign regarding the campaign's foreign policy positions. For example, on June 17, 2016, Symes sent J.D. Gordon an email with a memo to Senator Sessions that we discussed at our recent meeting, and asked Gordon to both read it and share it with Sessions. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including a new beginning with Russia. B. National Interest hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During both their March 24 phone call and their March 31 in-person meeting, Symes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following those conversations, Symes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and that CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' Chief of Staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Symes in contact with Senior Policy Advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Symes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Symes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he had drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Burt. Symes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Symes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office do not contain such a draft. After board members expressed concern to Symes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Symes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security and capacity. On April 25, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have the chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI's invitation to the speech itself and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Symes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump. When the pre-speech reception began on April 27, a receiving line was quickly organised so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Symes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Symes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the pre-speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying, it's refreshing." Several public reports state that, in addition to speaking to Kushner at the pre-speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation, nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the National Interest specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech, or would have had the opportunity to do so. Symes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport. He wanted McDonald's or KFC. Jeff Sessions post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included in additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts, on May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicates that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Board said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders and Jacob Heilbrunn, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23 event. Kislyak does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organised at least 2 dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. The dinners included CNI-affiliated individuals such as Richard Burt and Zalmay Khalilzad, a former US ambassador to Afghanistan and Iraq, and the person who had introduced Trump before the April 27, 2016 foreign policy speech. Khalilzad also met with Sessions one-on-one separately from the dinners. At the dinners and in the meetings, the participants addressed US relations with Russia, including how US relations with NATO and European countries affected US policy toward Russia. But the discussions were not exclusively focused on Russia. Khalilzad, for example, recalled discussing nation-building and violent extremism with Sessions. In addition, Sessions asked Saunders of CNI to draft 2 memoranda not specific to Russia, one on Hillary Clinton's foreign policy shortcomings and another on Egypt. D. Jared Kushner's continuing contacts with Symes. Between April 2016 speech at the Mayflower Hotel and the presidential election, Jared Kushner had periodic contact with Symes. Those contacts consisted of both in-person meetings and phone conversations, which concerned how to address issues relating to Russia, and in the campaign, how to move forward with the advisory group of foreign policy experts that Symes had proposed. Symes recalled that he, not Kushner, initiated all conversations about Russia, and that Kushner never asked him to set up back-channel conversations with Russians. According to Symes, after the Mayflower speech in late April, Symes raised the issue of Russian contacts with Kushner, advised that it was bad optics for the campaign to develop hidden Russian contacts, and told Kushner both that the campaign should not highlight Russia as an issue and should handle any contacts with Russians with care. Kushner generally provided a similar account of his interactions with Symes. Among the Kushner-Symes meetings was one held on August 17, 2016 at Symes' request in Kushner's New York office. The meeting was to address foreign policy advice that CNI was providing and how to respond to the Clinton campaign's Russia-related attacks on candidate Trump. Just checking the footnotes here. In advance of the meeting, Symes sent Kushner a Russia policy memo laying out what Mr. Trump may want to say about Russia. In a cover email transmitting that memo and a phone call to set up the meeting, Symes mentioned a well-documented story of highly questionable connections between Bill Clinton and the Russian government, parts of which, according to Symes, had even been discussed with the CIA and the FBI in the late 1990s and shared with the independent counsel at the end of the Clinton presidency. Kushner forwarded the email to senior Trump campaign officials Stephen Miller, Paul Manafort and Rick Gates with the note, "Suggestion only." Manafort subsequently forwarded the email to his assistant and scheduled a meeting with Symes. Manafort was on the verge of leaving the campaign by the time the scheduled meeting with Symes, and Symes ended up meeting only with Kushner. During the August 17 meeting, Symes provided Kushner the Clinton-related information that he had promised. Symes told Kushner that redaction, personal privacy. Symes claimed that he had received this information from former CIA and Reagan White House official Fritz Ermeth, who claimed to have learned it from US intelligence sources, not from Russians. Symes perceived that Kushner did not find the information to be of interest or use to the campaign, because it was, in Syme's word, old news. When interviewed by the office, Kushner stated that he believed that there was little chance of something new being revealed about the Clintons given their long career as public figures, and that he never received from Syme's information that could be operationalised for the Trump campaign. Just checking the footnotes. Referring to an email, the memorandum recommending downplaying Russia as a US foreign policy suggests that some tend to exaggerate Putin's flaws. The memorandum also recommended approaching general Russian-related questions in the framework of how to work with Russia to advance important US national interests, and that a Trump administration not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. The memorandum did not discuss sanctions, but did address how to handle Ukraine-related questions, including questions about Russia's invasion and annexation of Crimea. Back to the report. Despite Kushner's reaction, Symes believed that he provided the same information at a small group meeting of foreign policy experts that CNI organised 4 sessions. 5. June 9, 2016, meeting at Trump Tower. On June 9, 2016, senior representatives of the Trump campaign met in Trump Tower with a Russian attorney expecting to receive derogatory information about Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. The meeting was proposed to Donald Trump Jr. in an email from Robert Goldstone at the request of his then-client Emin Agalarov, the son of Russian real estate developer Aris Agalarov. Goldstone relayed to Trump Jr. that the Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia, as part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Trump Jr. immediately responded that, "If it's what you say, I love it," and arranged the meeting through a series of emails and telephone calls. Trump Jr. invited campaign chairman Paul Manafort and senior advisor Jared Kushner to attend the meeting, and both attended. Members of the campaign discussed the meeting before it occurred, and Michael Cohen recalled that Trump Jr. may have told candidate Trump about an upcoming meeting to receive adverse information about Clinton without linking the meeting to Russia. According to written answers submitted by President Trump, he has no recollection of learning of the meeting at the time, and the office found no documentary evidence showing that he was made aware of the meeting or its Russian connection before it occurred. The Russian attorney who spoke at the meeting, Natalia Veselnitskaya, had previously worked for the Russian government and maintained a relationship with that government throughout this period of time. She claimed that funds derived from illegal activities in Russia were provided to Hillary Clinton and other Democrats. Trump Jr. requested evidence to support those claims, but Veselnitskaya did not provide such information. She and her associates had turned to a critique of the origin of the Magnitsky Act, a 2012 statute that imposed financial and travel sanctions on Russian officials, and that resulted in a retaliatory ban on adoptions of Russian children. Trump Jr. suggested that the issue could be revisited when and if candidate Trump was elected. After the election, Veselnitskaya made additional efforts to follow up on the meeting, but the Trump transition team did not engage. Setting up the June 9 meeting. Outreach to Donald Trump Jr. Aris Agalarov is a Russian real estate developer with ties to Putin and other members of the Russian government, including Russia's Prosecutor General Yuri Chaika. Aris Agalarov is the president of the Crocus Group, a Russian enterprise that holds substantial Russian government construction contracts, and that, as discussed above, Volume 1, Section 4, worked with Trump in connection with the 2013 Miss Universe campaign in Miss Universe pageant in Moscow and a potential Trump Moscow real estate project. The relationship continued over time as the parties pursued the Trump Moscow project in 2013-2014 and exchanged gifts and letters in 2016. For example, in April 2016, Trump responded to a letter from Aris Agalarov with a handwritten note. Aris Agalarov expressed interest in Trump's campaign, passed on congratulations for winning in the primary, and according to one email drafted by Goldstone, an offer of his support and that of many of his important Russian friends and colleagues, especially with reference to US-Russian relations. On June 3, 2016, Emin Agalarov called Goldstone, Emin's then publicist. Goldstone is a music and events promoter who represented Emin Aglarov from approximately late 2012 until late 2016. While representing Emin Aglarov, Goldstone facilitated the ongoing contact between the Trumps and the Aglarovs, including an invitation that Trump sent to Putin to attend 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. We've got some redactions there. Goldstone understood redaction, a Russian political connection, and Emin Aglarov indicated that the attorney was a prosecutor. Goldstone recalled that the information that might interest the Trumps involved Hillary Clinton. Some more redactions there. The redaction mentioned to Emin Aglarov, I'm having trouble with that one, Aglarov, was Natalia Veselnitskaya. I can get that one. From approximately 1998 until 2001, Veselnitskaya worked as a prosecutor for the Central Administrative District of the Russian Prosecutor's Office, and she continued to perform government-related work and maintain ties in the Russian government following her departure. She lobbied and testified about the Magnitsky Act, which imposed financial sanctions and travel restrictions on Russian officials, and which was named for a Russian tax specialist who exposed fraud and later died in a Russian prison. Putin called the statute a purely political, unfriendly act, and Russia responded by barring a list of current and former US officials from entering Russia and by halting the adoption of Russian children by US citizens. Veselnitskaya performed legal work for Denis Katsev, the son of Russian businessman Peter Katsev, and for his company Prevezon Holdings Limited, which was a defendant in a civil forfeiture action alleging the laundering of proceeds from the fraud exposed by Magnitsky. She also appears to have been involved in an April 2016 approach to a US congressional delegation in Moscow offering confidential information from the Prosecutor General of Russia about interactions between certain political forces in our two countries. Shortly after his June 3 call with Emin Aglarov, Goldstone emailed Trump Jr. The email stated, "Good morning. Emin just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father Aras this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aras and Emin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information, and would you be able to speak to Emin about it directly? I can also send this info to your father via Rona, but she is ultra sensitive, so I wanted to send to you first. Best, Rob Goldstone." Within minutes of this email, Trump Jr. responded emailing back, "Thanks, Rob, I appreciate that. I'm on the road at the moment. Perhaps I just speak to Emin first. Seems we have some time, but if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. Could we do a call first thing next week when I'm back?" Goldstone conveyed Trump Jr.'s interest to Emin Aglarov, emailing that Trump Jr. wants to speak personally on the issue. On June 6, 2016, Emin Aglarov asked Goldstone if there was any news, and Goldstone explained that Trump Jr. was likely still travelling for the final elections, where Trump will be crowned the official nominee. On the same day, Goldstone again emailed Trump Jr. and asked when Trump Jr. was free to talk with Emin about this Hillary info. Trump Jr. asked, what did he say? Trump Jr. asked they could speak now, and Goldstone arranged a call between Trump Jr. and Emin Aglarov. On June 6 and June 7, Trump Jr. and Emin Aglarov had multiple brief calls. Also on June 6, 2016, Aras Aglarov called Ike Kavalades and asked him to attend a meeting in New York with the Trump Organization. Kavalades is a Georgia-born naturalized U.S. citizen who worked in the United States for the Crocus Group and reported to Aras Aglarov. Kavalades told the office that in a second phone call on June 6, 2016, Aras Aglarov asked Kavalades if he knew anything about the Magnitsky Act, and Aras sent him a short synopsis for the meeting and Veselnitskaya's business card. According to Kavalades, Aras Aglarov said the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the Magnitsky Act, and he asked Kavalades to translate. Awareness of the meeting within the campaign. On June 7, Goldstone emailed Trump Jr. and said that Emin asked that I schedule a meeting with you and the Russian government attorney who is flying over from Moscow. Trump Jr. replied with Manafort identified as the campaign boss. Jared Kushner and Trump Jr. would likely attend. Goldstone was surprised to learn that Trump Jr., Manafort and Kushner would attend. Cavalides puzzled by the list of attendees and that he checked with one of Emin Aglarov's assistants, Roman Beniamov, who said that the purpose of the meeting was for Veselnitskaya to convey negative information on Hillary Clinton. Beniamov, however, stated that he did not recall having known or said that. Early on June 8, 2016, Kushner emailed his assistant asking her to discuss a 3 p.m. meeting the following day with Trump Jr. Later that day, Trump Jr. forwarded the entirety of his email correspondence regarding the meeting with Goldstone to Manafort and Kushner under the subject line Russia, Clinton, private and confidential, adding a note that the meeting got moved to 4 tomorrow at my offices. Kushner then sent his assistant a second email informing her that the meeting with Don Jr. is 4 p.m. now. Manafort responded, see you then. P. Rick Gates, who was a deputy campaign chairman, stated during interviews with the office that in the days before June 9, 2016, Trump Jr. announced at a regular morning meeting of the senior campaign staff and Trump family members that he had a lead on negative information about the Clinton Foundation. Gates believed that Trump Jr. said the information was coming from a group in Kazakhstan and that he was introduced to the group by a friend. Gates recalled that the meeting was attended by Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Paul Manafort, Hope Hicks, and joining late, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. According to Gates, Manafort warned the group that the meeting likely would not yield vital information and they should be careful. Hicks denied any knowledge of the June 9 meeting before 2017. Kushner did not recall if the planned June 9 meeting came up at all earlier that week. Michael Cohen recalled being in Donald J. Trump's office on June 6 or 7 when Trump Jr. told his father the meeting to obtain adverse information about Clinton was going forward. Cohen did not recall Trump Jr. stating that the meeting was connected to Russia. From the tenor of the conversation, Cohen believed that Trump Jr. had previously discussed the meeting with his father, although Cohen was not involved in any such conversation. In an interview with the Senate Judiciary Committee, however, Trump Jr. stated he did not inform his father about the emails or the upcoming meeting. Similarly, neither Manafort nor Kushner recalled anyone informing candidate Trump of the meeting, including Trump Jr. President Trump has stated to this office in written answers to questions that he has no recollection of learning at the time that his son, Manafort or Kushner, was considering participating in a meeting in June 2016 concerning potentially negative information on Hillary Clinton. Okay, and that brings us to the end of this episode. We're at our 40 or so minutes. We'll continue on with the events of the 9th of June 2016 in the next episode.